Welcome back to another edition of the Early Weigh-In podcast. This week we have UFC Vegas 22, a showdown at the Apex between ranked middleweights and Derek Brunson and Kevin Holland. If you enjoy the breakdowns, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Keep us coming back every week. And last week was another weird night of fights. We had two no contests this time, and without that Leon eye poke in the main event and the Montel Kate decision that rightfully so we thought should have gone our way, could have been a much different night, man.
Yeah, it sure could have. And to add fuel to the fire, it was actually the straight picks that kind of bit us in the ass, for that's usually where we find our most success. Going down the line of our straight picks, both Serkinov and Witt didn't really get a chance to get started. They got clipped early, and the fight just never really got to play out. We were also on the winning side of that with the Dan Ige fight, where first punch landed 18 seconds and he got Gavin Tucker out of there. The Yoder bet, looking back on it, it was a stab and it was a girl fight, but I think Hill came in there and actually looked like the minus 300 favorite in that bout. Let's see, the Jourdain Rojo under, it was pure chaos, and realistically I'd make that bet again. I think we got it at minus 110. I really think that was good odds, especially considering how that fight played out. The Leon Yaya, man, the Yaya bet, one of our better bets of the night. The Leon bet, it looked to be going our way, but like you said, the DQ didn't get to see it played out. Either way, this week it's a new week, and we have already made a bet. If you follow us on Twitter, we have already made a 2-unit play on Gregor Gillespie, which, judging by the line movement, has been a really good play. I think right now he's sitting at like a minus 230 just about everywhere else. And I don't know, I feel good about it already. So let's not waste any more time, and we'll hop right into it with our first fight on the card between JP Bays versus Bruno Silva in the 125-pound division. Bays is a 2-time Contender Series alumni, where the first time it wasn't successful, and he ended up actually getting finished by Joby Sanchez, who hasn't had much or didn't have any success in the UFC. Bays, he's really good, and he's shown this on his other Contender Series bout at his takedowns. Really good at timing his takedowns and chaining together his wrestling attempts, even if he doesn't get it that first shot. I do have some worries about him, although it does say that he's on a 5-fight win streak. I went through and watched that Gamzat Magomedov fight where it just says win in round 3. Come to find out, he was losing that fight and only got it stopped because of an illegal strike to the back of the head during a finishing sequence, which ultimately ended up setting off a complete cage rush by both coaches, and it became a Dylan Dennis Khabib type scenario. So even there, that's 2018, where he's taking a loss to a 2-0 fighter, and we're now making an assumption that Bay should be a
2-1 favorite here
over Bruno Silva, a training partner in Henry Cejudo, where he's shown that he can keep it competitive with the best of the best, especially if you look at that Tagir Ulanbekov fight. Really all that Ulanbekov could handle. Bruno Silva has kind of a unique style of defending striking by using an open palm and parrying those strikes. And being so small, it makes him easy to get underneath the hips of guys. I think that it'll be really difficult for JP Baez to utilize his wrestling heavy attack on somebody who's 5'4" in Bruno Silva.
Yeah, man, we kind of see this the same, and I'm not really buying all the hype around JP Baez this week. You mentioned the Joby Sanchez loss, already cut from the UFC. Then he, goes to the regional scene, gets 4 wins over relatively nobody, and he comes back to the second time on the Contender Series as a minus 500 favorite against Jacob Silva, who's now on a 3-fight losing streak, but that was as early stoppage as it gets there, He trains out of Fortis MMA, a main sparring partner there, Miles Johns, and he's best friends with fellow South African Don Madge there. BJJ brown belt, excellent on the mat, but like you said, absolutely nothing that Bruno Silva has not seen before, man. The last fight against Ulanbekov, that's a Russian been training in the mountains with Khabib since he was 16. It's a different level of wrestling than I think JP brings. The side of Bruno Silva, you probably thank Henry Cejudo for his UFC contract there. It's not really the best of record, and outside of his draw with Casey Kenny, not really a stellar competition until he kind of got into the UFC. But man, Ajius Khalid Taha, who is a bantamweight, and David Dvorak and Ulanbekov, who I think are top 10 flyweights myself, he made all those fights super, super close. And, before he used to accept just laying on the bottom, but what I took note of in the Ulanbekov fight is he didn't, man. He got back to the cage. He dug the underhooks. The cardio look improved. And training out of fight ready, man. They have your cardio under point. You saw how good Eric Anders looked last week after making the switch there. He's got good wrestling himself, man. And I've already put a 1 unit stab on Bruno Silva at a plus 165. So I've done my job. I just need the dog to come through for me.
Yeah, you take into consideration that Taha was juiced in that fight, and then look at his 2 other opponents. JP Bays is easily his easiest opponent to date in the UFC. And sitting at these odds, he is kind of getting disrespected. And as we've seen that line movement, it is going in the direction of Bruno Silva. So if you are going to hop on it, I'd recommend doing it now.
Yeah, all the question marks around JP. He's the one with the pressure on him here. Bruno's on that 3-fight losing streak, and he's backed in the corner. I think we're prone to see a dangerous Bruno Silva on Saturday.
I like it.
Our second fight of the night is Julija Avila, who is 8-2, taking on Julija Stoliarenko, who is 9-4-1. Takes place in the women's bantamweight division, and at one time, man, Julija Avila was one of the more promising female prospects there. She's one of 3 massive favorites on the card here. As always, one of them pretty posed for an upset there, and on the receiving end of one last time herself. She does only have 10 fights there, but you see in her first 3 fights, she's already got wins over Nico Montano and Marion Reneau, and she's dominated Pannie Chiasson there. She is a very, very athletic girl, former D1 college athlete, really good pressure and knees in the clinch. On the side of Stoliarenko there, she got her first taste of the UFC on The Ultimate Fighter as well, but she was one of those of many girls that took the featherweight shot there and have since dropped down to 135. Went back home to the European regional scene, and she dusted these girls, but there was, no level of competition there. And Yanez showed that when she came back to the UFC. 10 arm bars, and from guard there, a staple of women's MMA submission. She's a big dog, and like I said, if one of these hit on Saturday, it's basically a free roll. I might take a shot on her. Julija Avila coming off a big upset loss herself, but probably going to be a pass for me.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that Julija Avila should be the 3-1 favorite here, although I would agree that she's the A side. You touched on her wrestling and that top pressure of hers. I think if she puts Stoliarenko on her back, that it could be a really long night for Stoliarenko. That being said, Stoliarenko is not new to the combat sports arena. She has well over 20 fights, even though her record doesn't show it. A lot of those coming in lethal way where she's using headbutts in it. She's not gonna go away from violence in her fight.
She shows caution to the wind.
Yeah, she'll definitely welcome anything that Julia brings her. Like you said, the first 2 fights in the UFC were really impressive from Julia, but losing to Sijara Eubanks is not. And I truly don't think that coming off of a loss to Sarge would grant you a 3-1 favorite over anybody in the UFC, much less somebody in Stoliarenko with the experience that she has and, shown that she herself outside of the UFC, is good. She's put together this 5-fight win streak and shown that she at least deserves this shot. Yanez a tough person to debut against and a seasoned veteran who's going to grind you out to that decision. Like you said, it's not really one I'm looking to bet, but if I was going to bet, I would definitely agree with you that Stoliarenko is the value side here.
Yeah, for sure. It's a dog or pass situation altogether there, and it's kind of like, can Stoliarenko implement that that wrestling and jiu-jitsu that Sarge did, because on the feet she's probably going to have her hands full with the more technical Avila there.
And that might come down to if Stoliarenko is strong enough to hold off the Julia wrestling attack. That's something that Julia kind of struggled with Sarge. She just wasn't able to overpower Sarge, and Eubanks ended up on top in a lot of those scrambles. So I would, like I said, Stoliarenko value side here, although it's not the best bet on the card.
For sure.
Moving on, we go to the 135-pound division where we see Montel Jackson, who's 9-2, taking on 5-1 Jesse Strader. Montel Jackson debuted against Simone and made a decent account of himself. Simone's a guy who you're going to lose your debut against, and you really can't put much stock in that loss at all. Then he rattles off those 3 wins over Brian Kelleher, Andre Sukumtoth, and Felipe Colares. Then drops it to Brett Johns, and it kind of gives you a gauge of where he's at talent-wise. I don't think that he's gonna be that upper echelon of the 135-pound division, especially considering how deep that division is. But I do think that he's going to beat the Jesse Straders. He's going to beat the Andre Sukumtas. Like, that's just going to happen. There's definitely a level to this game. And Montel Jackson being 5'10" and having a wrestling heavy attack, he's usually going to be able to implement that style of attack on much smaller guys. Strader, he rips heavy hooks to the body and looks to use his boxing to try and overwhelm his opponents, but he's at a huge size disadvantage here. And although he does like to welcome a throw down, drag him out, brawl, I don't think that Montel Jackson is going to be in front of him to welcome that type of attack. He's really, really quick, given his nickname, but he's also, quick to change levels and bring it to the ground. Jesse Strader is going to have a lot to overcome, similar to Montel Jackson in the Simone debut.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. Montel, significant skill gap between the two here. It's one of these fights that come together pretty much just this past weekend here. Strader taking it on short notice, and some of them think they're sending him to the slaughterhouse on Saturday. With Montel Jackson, punched that ticket on the Contender Series win and then had to take the short notice, debut against Ricky Simone. And something that that's in August of 2018. This guy didn't turn pro until August of 2017. So, 6 fights in the year of 2018. I feel like we're going to see constant improvement for him at such a young age, being as active as he is. But I will not, not going to lie to you, as good of a wrestler as he is, to see how well he was able to implement that in his previous fights. I was shocked to see Brett Johns really take over cardio and wrestling wise come late in that fight. But at range, Montel Jackson is very, very dangerous. I compare him a lot to Leon Edwards at the southpaw position. They have a dangerous left hand, a dangerous kick from that position. In the clinch, good knees and elbows. And I think that's something Strader's going to struggle with there. He does have a fight with Marcelo Rojo. He did get finished in that fight via knees in the clinch, and I think that's something Montel's going to have big success with there. But Jesse does dig to the body, and Montel being that tall frame, the body's going to be open for him to hit there. Really strong wrestler as well. If Montel doesn't give this guy any credit, he could come out there, Kevin Kroom, Roosevelt Roberts, hit him with a big overhand left and really change this fight. But it's another situation here, man, of a dogger pass, and I don't see Strader winning this fight on the scorecards by no means, taking it short notice, cardio. I feel like if you're going to stab on him, take him inside the distance or something. But to get Montel Jackson a minus 500 inside the distance at minus 150, or even the under 2.5 best line at minus 140, I think there's a bunch of value seeing that there's a significant talent gap between these two.
Yeah, it's similar to Ricky Simone's last fight. Or not his last fight against Brian Kelleher, but his fight right before that. It was against, hold on one sec while I pull it up. It was against Gaetano Perello, where we saw he was a massive, massive favorite in the odds and wasn't necessarily known for his finishing power, but because of that skill gap, like you talked about, it was an easy inside the distance win for him. And that's something that, like you said, I think we could really see in this one.
For sure, man. We move on to the middleweight division, where we see a matchup between Trevin Giles, who is 13-2, taking on Roman Dolidze, who is 8-0. Originally, man, Trevin Giles is supposed to fight Duplessis, and actually really wanted to bet Giles in that position, but I've since kind of flipped here. Giles, before getting into the UFC, he did get some wins over Ike Villanueva, over Brendan Allen, and even over Ryan Spann, who looked sensational on Saturday night. And at 28, he's still young with some time to improve. In that last fight with Bavon Lewis, he fought well behind the jab, showed a good right hand, and really didn't look for the home run shot. He was happy to extend the fight out a little bit, use his combinations to get the finish. On the mat, he's a pretty decent wrestler, but I did think James Cross kind of exposed his jiu-jitsu a little bit. And then, Gerald Mearshart and Zach Cummins both finished him in the third round, pretty much showing you there's some cardio issues there for Giles as well. For Roman, this, is a little worrisome as he's dropping down to 185 for the first time. When you check his social media, he looks a little slimmer, I will say, but the weight concern, it is an issue. And it's something I'm not looking to bet him, even though I side with him probably until after weigh-ins. He's a guy the UFC really likes. He's managed by Ali there. They try to give him Antigua first, the fight falls through. Then they try to give him Vinicius Moreira, the fight falls through. So then they give him Kadis Ibragimov. Those are easily the worst 3 light heavyweights on the roster. And he got up, a pretty big challenge in this last fight with John Allen, a guy that was pretty much giving him some in return. I thought so watching it. I thought so watching it back. 30-27 for Roman, but Man, was that a sweater when it hit the scorecards?
It sure was, and it's somebody like you said in John Allen who's lost to Vinicius Reneau. It's one that you shouldn't have a competitive bout. Although I would agree it should have been a unanimous decision. Yeah. Roman, like you said, ton of questions surrounding his weight cut, and although I have heard rumors that he's walking around at about 205, which is definitely nice to hear, especially considering we're planning on backing Roman. I do have some questions about his cardio that he's already shown problems with at 205 pounds. You know, when you talk about Roman Dolidze, it's easy to look past his grappling credentials because he is willing to stand up and throw these heavy bombs. But he is an ADCC champion, a Avila champion, both of those at 220 and above weight classes. So this is easily his smallest opponent that he's probably fought to date. Where Giles, as you mentioned, he had fought a couple of really good guys leading up into this UFC, and Brendan Allen, Ryan Spann, and Ike Villanueva, all guys that are bigger than him. So this really isn't anything that's new to him as well. One thing that does worry me about Giles is he is a Houston police officer by day, MMA fighter by night. It's not really what I like to see in somebody that I'm backing. If you can't commit full time, it will and does cut into your time that you could be training. I personally wouldn't recommend betting this fight, although especially pre-weigh-ins, although I and you both will personally be playing Roman Dolidze, and the line keeps moving in favor of us. If we just hold off, I think we could get Roman at really, really good odds. I think anything under minus 140, 145, I think that he's in playable range.
I do too, man. On the feet, I think he's a terror for Trevin Giles in the southpaw position. You know, he throws great kicks and stuff, and he's willing to pull that heel hook and end up on the bottom because he's so confident in his skills. And I like backing these Georgian wave of fighters here. You know, if they're short notice or not, they come out and they're looking good. And Giles is just not some guy that I like to back. And when you have a career that you've literally put your fighting career on hold for to go to the police academy, it's obvious that, you know, fighting is not his number one goal either here. And right now I see that as Roman's number one goal. And I do like my pick on him, but definitely something we want to wait till after the weigh-ins.
Yeah, and one other thing, you mentioned the James Krause fight. That was a split decision, and Krause took that on like a day's notice, and Giles got out grappled there. We're talking about somebody who's world-class grappling right here in Roman Dolidze. And there's a fight that I do like to try, like kind of draw some comparisons to, and it's the Rodolfo Vieira Fluffy Hernandez fight, where, you know, you see a high-level grappler with some cardio issues, but I think the biggest difference between those two comparisons is Roman's ability to stand up and trade with somebody. He does have the striking ability to where he could keep it competitive on the feet until he decides to take it to the ground. And with Giles showing the takedown defense that he has up until this point, I think it'll be relatively easy for the ex-205er and Dolidze to get him to the ground.
I do too, man.
Moving on, we go to the 155-pound weight class where we see Leonardo Santos, who's 41 years old, taking on Grant Dawson, who's only 27 years old. Santos has a record of 18-3-1, where Dawson is 16-1. But at only 27 years old, he's still at that prospect stage in his life. You know, he's another product coming out of James Krause's gym at Glory MMA. And he's on a 4-fight win streak in the UFC since getting his contract off the Dana White's Contender Series. With Dawson, it's obvious from his last 2 fights that the weight cut is not easy for him, which is why we're seeing him at 155 for the first time in the UFC. In his last fight against Derek Minner, he weighed in at 149, missing weight by almost 4 pounds, and then had to do a catch weight bout against Nad Narimani at 150. So finally, he's getting a shot at the weight class that is probably his natural weight class. Leonardo Santos on the other side, you know, he's coming off of the Ultimate Fighter Brazil Season 2, fighting the likes of Santiago Ponzinibbio, Thiago Santos, like big, strong dudes, and doing okay. You know, since he's moved to lightweight and he's strung together 7 wins and 1 draw against high-level competition. So 2 of those, you know, being the Anthony Rocco Martin fight and the Kevin Lee fight, both of which he was big underdogs in, and he put the world on notice that at 155 he really is that upper echelon. I think Leonardo Santos, you know, he offers a lot of threats because the way that Dawson gets this done is by bringing it to the ground, and Leonardo Santos is a 7-time BJJ world champion. Not the thing that you want to hear if you're on if you're in Dawson's corner. I do think Santos being the bigger guy here has quite a few advantages, although Dawson also has a lot of threats. I lean towards Santos as one of my underdog plays for the night.
Yeah, man. Dawson he's the pupil of James Krause right now. He's really the big prospect that Glory MMA has right now. He he's constantly in the gym improving. This guy dates one of the fighters out of there. He's constantly in the corners of Kevin Kroom and other fighters out of there. It's nice. He is living that lifestyle day in and day out there. He's a very, very good wrestler, man, and he puts a pace on you like no other. He's landed 11 takedowns in his 4 UFC bouts, and he averages over 6 takedown attempts. I think in his first 2, he shot over 11 times a piece or something. It's somewhat Colby Covington-like, Mm-hmm. And he's beaten taller strikers and Mike Trezano and Julian Erosa, and he subbed Derek Minner, who, made Charles Rosa's jiu-jitsu look like shit. But on the feet, he's not the most technical. He can get some lazy takedown attempts as well because he's so confident in his wrestling. I see him having some success, though, with his calf kick and with his right hand. Leonardo Santos is one of those tall Muay Thai fighters that's real heavy on that lead leg, not a lot of movement to the head there, and it's there to be hit himself. But, man, Nova now Jiu-Jitsu standout before he turned to MMA there, turning pro in 2002. They give him undefeated Takanori Gomi right out the gates, a UFC legend there himself. And he wins the Ultimate Fighter season that year. He loses to Ponzinibbio. Ponzinibbio, of course, gets hurt like always. Santos steps in and subs the guy in the main event there to take the win and does the right thing. Drops to 155 where he looks good. Rocco Martin's a good win. Kevin Lee is a good win. He knocks out Adrian Martins the fight after he sleeps Islam Makhachev. Another decent win. And then the injury started catching up with him with his age, and we've only seen him, have 2 fights in the last couple of years. That round 3 against Bogota, dominated Stevie Ray for as long as it lasted. Mm-hmm. Pretty much dominated Bogota. But come that round 3, he got off the stool pretty slow. Granted, he did take a couple nut shots and then an illegal knee that night as well. But it was something to notice that cardio coming out of round 3 was very worrisome here. It's a much closer fight than where it sits at with Grant coming up with, he's a grappling heavy attack, and Santos is going to offer that trouble on the mat.
And I think it's kind of cool that although we don't agree on the outcome of this fight, or I guess on the winner of this fight, we do agree on the outcome, and that's that this is not going to see the judges. And that right now it's sitting at plus 120, and it's something that I think we're looking to play somewhat heavy.
Yeah, man, I like the under here. Both guys have a route to victory. I think Santos has the ability to put Grant out on the feet. I think Grant, has the potential to just show that he is a rightful contender in this division and show this age gap between the two is going to be pretty significant.
Not to mention Dawson, although he has those 11 submission victories, an 87% finish rate really shows that he has the finishing power on the ground as well if he is able to get it there. And Leonardo Santos, you mentioned that the gas being somewhat of an issue in that 3rd round in his last fight out. It definitely, like I said, it's something where we're actually taking that extra 2 minutes and 30 seconds strategically by taking the fight doesn't go the distance as opposed to the under 2.5 here. I think that the fight probably will end in that 3rd round, but we do not see this going to the judges.
For sure, man. We have a freaking killer main event of the prelim here in the women's bantamweight division between Marion Reneau, who is 9-6-1, taking on Macy Chiasson, who is 6-1. Another fight that's been a victim of the COVID pushbacks and stuff. I think this is now the 3rd time this fight's been set to be scheduled. Reneau did test positive for COVID back in December there, but it was something to note on her social media. She said 0 symptoms and stuff, so that is something to note, and it's good there. But on playing devil's advocate, something kind of bad to note. Since cutting Anderson Silva and Yoel Romero, she is officially the oldest person on the roster here.
And at that age, a COVID, that could be deadly.
It could. She's lost 3 in a row, man, to Raquel Pennington, Yana Kunitskaya, and Kat Zagano. And in my opinion, it really doesn't take much to kind of see what the UFC wants here. They tried giving her to Irene Aldana and Caitlin Vieira already, who are also good prospects. They're trying to hype up there a little bit. On Macy Chiasson, she was your Ultimate Fighter featherweight winner. Again, even a pointless winner there. She has dropped down to 135. And the UFC has been pretty favorable for this girl. They match her up with Gina Mazzani, who she's a minus 550 favorite against. Sarah Morris, 750 favorite. Shayna Young, minus 875 favorite. And then they give her a minus 450, and she drops the ball against Lena Landsberg, where that cardio became a huge issue. She's got a huge size advantage in this fight here, and she looks to have hired a nutritionist. So I'm really hoping that the weight and cardio don't seem to be an issue anymore.
Yeah, at 43 years old and an L3, that's really all you need to tell me for me to not be on this fight at all. You know, you look over the record of who Reneau's been able to beat up until this point, and her most legit wins are over girls that she has a clear size advantage over, two of those being Jessica Andrade and Sarah McMahon. Reneau, you know, when it comes to anybody who outsizes her, you can almost guarantee a unanimous decision for her opponent. She has really, really good Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but just doesn't have the wrestling to get the fight where she needs it to be. And that's where the size advantage really comes into play. Macy, you know, she's still young in her MMA career, but training out of Fortis, she's proven to be an absolute killer. Like you said, at only less than 4 years of being a pro, still a lot of improvements being made in her game. And at the end of the day, we rarely ever bet a women's fighter who's a heavy favorite like that, unless there's a really, really good reason. And after dropping that loss to Lena Landsberg, it's really hard to financially back her at all. You know, I think that Reneau at 41 years old or 43 years old, she's just not adding anything to her skill set. And, you know, I don't know if you touched on it, but the Instagram pictures show that she's not getting top of the line training either. And I think that her best days are behind her. Macy's just going to be a little bit too big, a little bit too young, and a little bit too athletic for Reneau to implement any of her game plan.
Yeah, over there at Trifecta MMA, not a lot of girls on the mat with her. And throughout her career, it doesn't seem like she's made a ton of improvements. And, you know, to touch on the specific post, she's legit playing dodgeball in there with like white belts and blue belts. And, you know, Macy's over here grinding with Jinyu Fry, with you know, Emily Ducote, with, you know, Cheyanne Buys here in our next fight.
Right. Kicking off the main card, we have the Warrior Princess, Cheyanne Buys, who's 5-1, and the other half of the husband-wife combo on this card, taking on, but Montserrat Ruiz, who's 9-1. This is taking place in the women's strawweight division. Cheyanne Buys, she's coming off her UFC debut win on the Contender Series against Hillary Rose in August of last year. But she's only been a pro for the last 3 years. That being said, she has an amateur record that is pretty extensive, dating all the way back to 2013 and having more than 10 fights on that amateur record. Funny enough, it's actually her amateur record where you see that she's faced a higher level of competition, and Jillian Robertson and Vanessa Demopoulos, both of which she dropped. But at least she's only 25 years old, and she's going to continuously grow. Since that loss to Vanessa Demopoulos, she's put, or since her last loss, I forget who it was to, but she's on a 4-fight win streak. And, you know, she's made a good account of herself. We've seen plenty of these prospects coming into the UFC, especially on the women's side. And I do think that the UFC is giving her a stepping stone here in Montserrat Ruiz, where you can, you know, you see a 9-1 record, but you take a look down the line and she's really not fought the highest level of competition. Realistically, her only legit competition that she's faced is in her last 2 bouts, where she's 1-1. One of those bouts she dropped to
Danielle Taylor.
Yeah, Danielle Taylor, who's 5 foot herself, and one of the only girls that Montserrat would ever have a size advantage over at 5 foot herself. So dropping that one to Danielle Taylor, it really makes me hesitant to back Ruiz at all here. Like I said, the stage is set for Buys to become a star here. And I think at 25 years old and the looks that she has all the potential to be one of those Paige Van Zants.
Yeah, man. And she was supposed to take on Kay Hansen here, another girl that's pretty easy on the eyes. And I think the UFC was doing them a favor here, putting them on their main card, especially to kick them off here. You know, the 12-fight amateur career, it's nice to see, man, especially when you see good competition throughout her amateur career. And she also, again, trains at Fortis with good girls on the mat. She's always working with her husband, Miles Johns, all the time there. She throws great volume and combination. She's got a good right hand, left hook that follows. And she's just going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit better in there on Saturday night, man. Ruiz, you know, she trains out of King's MMA there, and she's stepping up on about a week's notice here. I do think at 9-1, being an Invicta, the UFC call, it was eventually coming. It was inevitable, but at this point, it is a little bit premature. And I think that Danielle Taylor, it kind of shows you where she's at as far as skill level and where she's going to fit into that division. You know, she's a main sparring partner there, Jocelyn Edwards, who has had a little bit of success in the UFC so far. And in October, she's posting pictures there training with the Shevchenko sisters and recently getting her purple belt, under 10th Planet and Eddie Bravo. So, she's developing, man. I just really do think that although the line is wide, it might be a little appropriate here. Again, Cheyanne by is just a little too athletic, a little too big. I think she takes probably a unanimous decision win here.
I think we have the same read there.
Exciting matchup in our welterweight division between Max Griffin, who is 16-8, and Song Kenan, who is 16-5. We cashed on Max Griffin last time out in his dismantling of Brahimaj there. I personally already bet him at a -160. Forgot to refresh my computer this morning and saw him at a -200. I've done my job. I just need Max Griffin to do his on Saturday, man. Losing record in the UFC, not something that you really like to, see when you want to back a fighter. But, he debuted against Colby Covington there. He's beaten Mike Perry, and he's had a couple split decisions against Cowboy Oliveira not go his way. There's not a person on the planet that'll tell you he lost that Thiago Alves fight. It was in Brazil and a lot of home cooking there. The dude's as durable as they come outside of Colby's ground and pound in round 3. He's never been finished on the feet. Got a really good jab, and he just has this way of grinding and making these fights dirty and pretty much gassing his opponent there. On Song Kenan's side, he's 4-1 in the UFC, but he was signed off of a 2-fight losing streak, and that's something that is, pretty rare to see there, but he's made good of his UFC opportunities so far there. He's a huge welterweight. He's actually fought and lost to Israel Adesanya at 185 pounds. I don't think Max Griffin is top 10. Max Griffin's never going to touch a belt, but this is a big step up between the Bobby Nashes, the Hector Aldanas, the Callum Potters of the world that Kenan Song has been facing here. He's one of those Muay Thai fighters, man, that's real heavy on that leg, doesn't move his head. And, again, come round 3, that big weight cut has seemed to take a toll on him here. I think Max Griffin is really live and posed for a finish come round 3.
Yeah, like you said, cashing on Max is huge. I know he's coming into this one with some new ink on him. After, splitting open Ramiza Brahimaj's ear, he got that tattooed on his elbow. And so I've become a Max Griffin fan recently. He said before his last fight against Brahimaj that he had recently discovered how to properly strike. He had suffered a hamstring injury, and it forced him to transition to southpaw for a good portion of his training. And he said he finally understood angles. That being said, he gets that TKO win, and now I'm kind of worried that at 35 years old, he's starting to fall in love with this striking ability, and he's forgetting what kind of got him to this stage. Song Kenan, he's got 14 of his 16 wins by finish, and not really the guy you want to stand and trade with. You talked about him being a big 170er, and it's just, if I thought Max Griffin was going to come out here and immediately shoot for the takedown and try and get the easiest win possible, I would have also liked to have played him, especially at that -160 price tag you got on him. But here at -200, I think Song, if he can keep it on the feet, which he hasn't shown to be great at doing, but he is good at least popping back up to his feet. Song, he hasn't really beaten anybody of note. You talked about the 2 losses that he had coming into this. At least one of them was to Brad Riddell, who's in the UFC now.
In the co-main event.
Yeah, in the co-main event. So I will say, Song is rightfully the underdog in this position. I just don't know if I'm confident enough to bet Max Griffin, especially at 2-1 favorite odds.
Yeah, and hearing about his striking, I actually kind of like it to an extent that he's learning about the striking, because the guy's mixed in 12 takedowns in his last 4 victories. So to have that striking edge, maybe it's, he can strike enough that, makes people forget about those takedowns and they come a little easier. Because, Song Kenan, Derek Krantz, took him down at will. Krantz that dominated the entire round 3. Another case of home cooking in China, if you ask my opinion. That fight is what showed me Max Griffin really has the ability to take this to the mat. And I don't want to say make quick work of it, because he just really doesn't. Like 8 of his 9 fights have gone to decision in the UFC. He just has that grindy type of style. But I think Max Griffin probably wins a unanimous decision on Saturday.
I like it. Moving on, we go to the men's bantamweight division, where we see Adrian Yanez, who's 12-3, taking on Gustavo Lopez, who's 12-5. Yanez really taking the UFC by storm. It's kind of hard to go without comparing him to Street Jesus, old Jorge Masvidal, just being a little bit younger, but having the same charisma in the octagon. I can remember his first fight. He looked incredible against Victor Rodriguez. But after getting that first round KO, we both kind of looked at each other and talked about how in that finishing sequence, he left himself open for a lot of those counter shots of Victor Rodriguez. And although his chin didn't tell us that we should be suspect of it, I don't like that he's eating huge shots from somebody in a finishing sequence. Yanez, similarly to Jorge Masvidal, is really, really calm inside the pocket and is patient with that kill shot. That's definitely something that I like, but we have seen in his career before that he's dropped to people who can get him to the mat. Gustavo Lopez, that's obviously going to be his path to victory here. He's coming off of his first round sub over Anthony Burchak, who, hasn't really panned out to be the greatest of talents, but it is at least a UFC caliber opponent that he's got to win over. And a much needed one coming off of that first debut loss against the machine, Mirab Davashvili. You're going to lose that fight, but even so, you don't drop your UFC debut and then drop another one. So it was a much needed win and kind of showed us that he does belong in the UFC.
Yeah, man. Yanez, kind of, like you said, taken by storm. He's become a fan favorite, man. On social media, he's really active there, talking with the fans and stuff. And something I love, spent a lot of time in LFA there before getting to the UFC. He dropped the ones to Miles Johns, Domingo Pilarte, good wrestlers who were able to put him on his back, and you're right there. But since then, man, he's finished 4 of his 5 wins inside the distance. He put Brady Hong out on the feet with a nasty left hook. And, the head kick in his debut over Victor Rodriguez was filthy. He's a BJJ black belt, which is nice to note as well. That's something that he got about a year ago. So he does offer submissions off his back for wrestlers that do want to take him there. But on the feet, man, his boxing is so sharp. He loves the left hook to the body. He will rip it, and he does his best work mainly when he gets you against the cage, like the Victor Rodriguez finish there. Gustavo Lopez trains out of Extreme Couture. He's been working with Kai Kamaka and Boston Salmon, both good boxers who have a little bit of size on them, and I think that's going to prep him well here for Adrian Yanez. I compare Gustavo Lopez a little bit to Jason Witt in the sense that we haven't really seen the full aspect of, the real Gustavo Lopez. He takes a Mirab debut, you're going to lose that one. And then you take Burchak on a short notice fight for him. And these guys had trained together. Apparently, that outcome was already known by a lot of people that Gustavo Lopez was gonna beat Burchak there. He's also lost to Andre Ewell, to John Castaneda, not really high level bantamweights. So I'm really hesitant to call Gustavo Lopez live here, but he comes out the gate super hot. His last 5 wins coming in the first round. I know one of our biggest plays of the night is the under here, and something I'm really confident on it's going to hit. Yeah,
it's guaranteed that this fight is going to be fireworks, which, like you said, instead of making that play on Yanez inside the distance, we'll cover our bases and still get a good value at the under 2.5.
For sure. Taking a step up, we moved to our men's heavyweight division where we see Tai Tuivasa, who is 11-3, taking on Dontel Mays, who is 8-4. And, man, Tuivasa, in 2018 kind of took the division by storm. He had 2 early knockouts and then beat Andrei Arlovsky. He's a former rugby player, one of those heavy-handed athletic Samoans that are fun to watch, But, in that JDS fight, he really got exposed as being a really one-dimensional fighter. He got clipped and put down, and he was mounted effortlessly, looked like a fish out of water. Straight up punching JDS while JDS is mounted on him, then goes to proceed to lose his next 2 where he loses to Blagoy Ivanov. He was just kind of hesitant to throw again, after losing taking his first loss there. And another guy that was much more experienced than he was. You move on to Spivak, which is a much better grappler, than Tuivasa was. They were feeding him to the wolves there, in my opinion. But he did get back in the win column where we cashed on him in the first round against Stefan Struve with 1 second left. I remember how hyped we were there. But Mays on the other side here is a guy, that the UFC has wanted their hands on for a really long time. And just looking at him, you can obviously see why. He's got a massive frame for the division. In his first pro fight, he's fighting Harry Honsucker, who is a eventual, Contender Series alum himself. And in the 5th pro fight, they rushed this guy to the Contender Series where he, kind of gets exposed, where his cardio is really becomes an issue, and Alan Crowder finishes him round 3. Makes good on that second attempt and kind of fed to the wolves and Cyril Gahn and Nascimento where, now your cardio has been exposed, and then, now your wrestling and jiu-jitsu has been exposed as well. Roque Martinez in the last one, big step down. Mays probably should have finished him. It was a lot more competitive than we like to see, but like Roque, I don't see Tai Tuivasa being the one that utilizes the grappling heavy attack that's going to be needed to put Montel or Dontel on his back, and I think that plus sitting at a plus 200, that makes Mays a pretty live dog here.
Yeah, so Tai Tuivasa coming off that huge win over Stefan Struve, and easily one of the more heated contests between you and I. He did end up getting cashing us in at the very last second of that first round, and really revamped his career because he was coming off those 3 straight losses. I know that he had actually been cut by the UFC before getting that Struve fight, which is why I don't think that Dontel Mays is a great pick right here. He's judging by the fact that Tuivasa just retired a 7-footer, I don't think that another guy who kind of relies on his size and length is going to be the one to beat a power puncher like Tai Tuivasa. Dontel Mays seems to be one of those guys, and it seems like we have one every single week that has all the physical attributes you could possibly want, but it's just not working out for him. None of it's clicking for him. And, like you said, since that Contender Series win, the UFC hadn't really given him a fair shake in the UFC. Those 2 fights against Ciryl Gane and Nascimento are both terrible stylistic matchups for him. And then they give him a gimme fight in Roque Martinez, and one that he makes competitive. And in my opinion, if Roque Martinez is making a fight competitive with you, I just can't even justify you or backing you as an underdog against somebody who in Tai Tuivasa, who, you're right, we've seen glaring holes in his game, but it's not holes that I've seen Dontel Mays really capitalize on in his style either. Tai Tuivasa, like I said, just a 2-1 favorite over any UFC caliber fighter would be a little bit ridiculous. But considering how close Roque Martinez made it, I do see where the odds makers are coming from. For me, it's a stay away fight. I think that this definitely isn't seeing the judges. I don't think that the under is too playable, but I think that we see a finish here, but I'm not confident on either side.
Yeah, man. With Tuivasa in that last fight with Struve, I took a lot away from that. DC talked about him coming out to California and training with his wrestlers, one of his heavyweight wrestlers and stuff, and how Tai really, really enjoyed it there. DC also talked about there on Fight Island, how Tai was just giving up the sauna to him, how he's not cutting from 320 pounds anymore. He's coming in much better shape. He had good clinch work, good head position against the cage, and good dirty boxing leading to the finish of Struve there. He's going to have to implement that. He doesn't want anything at Dontel Mays at range. He's got good teep kicks. And I'm going to take my shot at trying to call a finish here of a big dog. I think Dontel Mays, the knees that he leads with are going to be a huge issue for Tai Tuivasa here, who's going to have to close that distance. And like I said, I'm going to take my shot. I'm going to call Dontel Mays with a knockout with one of the knees up the middle.
I like it. In our co-main event, we go to the lightweight division where we see the gift Gregor Gillespie, who's 13-1, taking on Brad Riddell, who's 9-1. Our boy Gregor Gillespie looking to bounce back from that first career loss, and a brutal one at that, to Kevin Lee. I remember up until that Lee matchup, we were both kind of already talking about how Gregor Gillespie would match up against those upper echelon light heavyweights. Yeah, I didn't want to say it because it's a little embarrassing now, but yes, against Khabib. I mean, in my opinion, he's the closest thing that we have in America to Khabib. Gillespie, he's had 6 straight wins in the UFC before his loss to Kevin Lee, and 5 of 6 of those coming by first or second round finish. Like he's putting together this string of wins in Khabib-like fashion, just completely dismantling them. And some of those wins being over impressive grapplers in their own right. Some guys like Vince Pichel, who he just showed, there's levels to this game, and really just put on a show. And I think after that fight was when I had originally jumped on the Gillespie train. From what we've seen on IG, Gillespie, per usual, looks like he's in great shape. He's thrown out a couple workout routines that we can try and go along with, but we can't even get halfway through them before we just completely gas. You go over to the Riddell side, currently riding a 6-fight win streak himself, with 3 of those coming in the UFC to decent competition. I'd say the biggest difference between these guys you can see right off the bat is the way that they're getting these wins done. Gregor's leaving no question in anybody's mind, where Riddell's kind of getting these split decisions here and there. I think stylistically, you could take a step back and just narrow this down to this is a striker versus grappler. And with Riddell's wins and how he gets those finishes, it's no question to where he's trying to keep this. I just don't think it's going to be enough against an experienced grappler in Gillespie.
Man, you hit it right on the nail on the head there. It's a grappler in Gregor versus the striker in Riddell here. And all bias aside, Gillespie is one of our favorites, but I heavily favor him in this matchup here. One of the reasons we released a bet earlier, like a week ago, on Gregor Gillespie beating that line movement by a mile now. Seems like he's had enough time fishing, back to fighting again, Like you said, man, bouncing back from the Kevin Lee loss, you don't get a more spectacular, highlight than Kevin Lee got that night. And when I check that dude's Instagram, Gregor makes me feel like a lazy piece of shit. I mean, less than a week after getting KO'd by Kevin, he was back in the gym working. And he talks about 2 and 3 workouts a day of stuff that you and I, can't even do half of.
Right.
He's been working at Belmore kickboxing a whole lot as well, sharpening up his hands. He works that jab really, really well, and he's got a good right hand. Gregor, I don't really know I can compare him to, but he knows how to strike just enough to then get the takedown. He makes you think about it just enough to then he's going to, get the takedown even easier than, he's got great chain wrestling. So if you stuff the first one, you got 2 or 3 more attempts coming at you. Holds, all kind of wrestling stats. And you'll see, I personally consider him a top 5 wrestler in the UFC. On Brad Riddell, like Kai Car-France, was the Tiger Muay Thai, switched over to City Kickboxing, where he's actually a striking coach there. People really respect this guy's ability on the feet. Made his debut against, a fucking crazy fight against Jamie Malarkey there when the same night Izzy won his belt. And he's since fought Magomed Mustafayev and Alex De Silva, both who did have success taking him down, but when it got on the feet, they wanted no part of Riddell on the feet and kind of let Riddell take over there. He has got one of the nicest pull counter right hands that I have seen to date here, but there's a glaring hole, that he has. And I know City Kickboxing loves to pride themselves on it. And, up until a couple weeks ago, Izzy showed it. They like to pride themselves on that takedown defense, but Izzy, Kai Car-France, they all showed that's a big hole that they have in their game. I think the takedowns come easy for Gregor on Saturday. And again, I think it's another one that we see the under on. I think Gregor's wrestling is so dominant, and if anybody has the skill on the feet to put him away, it's somebody like Riddell.
And I told you earlier in the week that was one that I was trying to lay off of. I'm glad that we beat that Gillespie line and betting him straight. But the under is something that does kind of worry me a little bit. Coming off that huge KO victory, we've seen a lot of fighters just try and get back to their roots and play it safe. And that's something that I could see Gillespie doing. Although he does look to get that finish on the ground, I definitely could see him kind of limiting the risks he takes, especially just like he's one of the most brutal KOs I think I've ever seen.
I talked about it in Tuivasa's last one with the rematch from Blagoy, Francis Ngannou's first loss when he fights Derek Lewis. They're hesitant. They're hesitant to throw. I completely understand what you're saying when they get that first loss, the first big one especially there. I see what you're saying, and I don't mind laying off, but the fact that we beat that Gregor line by a mile for our boys,
that's a win enough right there.
Sure. Our main event of the evening, we have number 7 ranked Derek Brunson, who is 21-7, taking on number 10 Kevin Holland, who is 21-5. Pivotal matchup in the men's middleweight division here, man. Brunson has been a staple of that division all the way back to the Strikeforce days. Here recently kind of been sort of the stepping stone for a lot of contenders to see if they can make that next step up, as they climb the division here. And he's really only lost to the best of that division has to offer, a much younger Jacare Souza, Yoel, Whitaker, Izzy. The whole world knows that he beat Anderson Silva that night. He's a very, very good wrestler when he wants to use it, and I think he's going to have a really big strength advantage in the clinch and in the wrestling if it were to go here. He's made the move to Sanford MMA, where he's now 3-0. He's become a much more patient fighter, not chasing guys around the octagon, and they've gotten him to, to revert back to that wrestling where we've seen him land 6 takedowns in his last 3 fights. Kevin Holland, Fighter of the Year for 2020, he knocked out Fluffy so quick. There's not really much you could take from it, even though it looks good now. He then took on short notice in Buckley, although he got to finish, pretty poor fight IQ. And then the fight that I take from the most, the Darren Stewart one, where round 3, he had basically nothing left. Antivero's fight, can't take anything from it. And then the Souza fight was kind of going Souza's direction, until he landed those crazy strikes. To say all that, on Kevin Holland, to say that I really, really like him, but I'm not sold that this guy is a top middleweight, man. How do you see this one?
Yeah, I think, I think Yeah, it's funny that this is, one of the few fights we disagree on here, but this is a fight that Kevin Holland's been calling for a long time. He talked about how he didn't like the way Brunson strikes, and it makes him mad. It makes him want to punch him. And I think that's...
I see it.
I do too. I do too. There's definitely some holes in the way Brunson throws his strikes. Yeah. I do think that this is actually one of the better matchups for Holland in this 185 division. There are a couple of grapplers like Jack Hermanson or Robert Whitaker, some other people that I think have more of a traditional way of utilizing the wrestling than Brunson. I think that Kevin Holland, right now he has all the momentum in the world really going for him, and a style where he's so active on his back, on the feet, that could really give Brunson some trouble. And at 37 years old, you really got to wonder if how long can he stay this gatekeeper of the division? Because like you said, he really has been, really good to serve as a litmus test for any of those up and coming fighters. When I look down the list of the fighters that Derek Brunson has beat, I'm not terribly impressed. We talk about the Lyoto Machidas, the Theodoros, the Daniel Kellys, all those guys are either not in the UFC or on some big losing streaks. Yeah. I think his biggest win would probably be Heinisch. And even Edmund, it's like I was calling the Brunson win. I think that Edmund Shabazian was just too much for Edmund to bite off at the time, where Heinisch, that's a decent win, but it's a guy who's 1-3 in his last 4, I believe. Derek Brunson has proven that he deserves to be in the UFC, but has also proven that he's not the upper echelon of that division. I do think that the smart thing that Derek Brunson could do is to try and wrestle, but as we saw in that last Kevin Holland fight with Jacare Souza, he's extremely active on his back and going to give Derek Brunson a lot of issues, and not going to give him that time to just kind of sit there and wait out these rounds.
Yeah, the guard was very, very dangerous. He threw up the triangle twice, and I mean, the moment it hit the mat, he was landing elbows, and you're never gonna forget that knockout of Jacare Souza. It was stupid. I mean, he cocked it back, he landed it, and Jacare literally sat there for like 10 seconds, just rocked before Kevin realized it. But, at range, he's got great timing on that right hand, but it's his first time being scheduled for 5 rounds. He was open about the marijuana smoking and stuff taking a toll on his cardio. It was nice to have 5 fights in 5 months, but now you got like a 5-month break there for yourself, 3-month break. Wonder if he's put the pot away or, if he's gone back to it a little bit, but regardless, dude, round 3 with Darren Stewart, he was eating elbows from hell. Ended up being a split decision. I know we bet Kevin Holland in that one. It made me super nervous. More or less, man, Derek Brunson made me eat my words in that last fight with Edmund Shabazian, who I think was another legit contender, somewhere on the level of Kevin Holland there. And I just think opening at a -120, now that I can get him at dog odds when he's the better wrestler, stronger, fought better competition, I've already played a dog play on Derek Brunson here.
So Kevin Holland, I want to preface this by saying that I don't think Kevin Holland is even near the level of striking that Israel Adesanya is, but he does have a very unique ability to mix up, the unpredictable strikes that of his game with really crisp, clean 1-2s and other karate, kung fu style attacks. And that's something that Derek Brunson really struggles with. The athleticism and length really does mimic the style that Israel Adesanya does. And as long as Kevin Holland can utilize that distance management and keep Derek Brunson guessing and give him things up the middle to kind of make him hesitant on those shots, I think Kevin Holland could do exactly what Israel Adesanya did here. Like I said, that Kevin Holland line, it opened at +100. Brunson opened as the -125, and we've since seen the lines completely flip. Right now, Holland's starting to get bet down a little bit. I do think he's becoming in more of a playable range. I wouldn't touch Holland anywhere above a -140. But as that line continues to trend downwards, I do think that it's a bet that we could look at playing.
For sure, man. A little disagreement there on the main event. Not a bad one, though. It's going to be fun to come down and watch on Saturday, and maybe a little contest out for everybody on Twitter to try to win some money.
Yes, sir.
But that does conclude all the 12 fights there for UFC Vegas 22, and it's going to be a nice night of fights with a main event that's a much anticipated one. A lot of shit talking on Twitter that's going to most definitely continue once these guys step into the cage.
100%.
But looking through the whole time, a whole list of 12 fights, is there a fight that stands out to you amongst all the others?
Yeah, it's got to be the Trevin Giles versus Roman
Yep.
Dolidze. A ton of questions coming into this, and I do think that Roman Dolidze could make easy work of this fight. It's just about which guy shows up that night.
Yeah, for me, the fight is going to be the Yanez and the Lopez one that we bet the under on already. Gustavo with 5 first-round finishes in his last 5, and we've seen what Adrian Yanez can do, man. Both those guys kind of give us a good old Mexican throwdown on Saturday.
I like that. My fighter to watch, it has to be Gregor Gillespie. He's our boy, and on top of it, he's got a lot of questions he needs to answer coming back from that huge loss, and I think he's going to deliver.
Yeah, hard for me not to side there with you as far as a fighter, but to pick somebody different, I'm going to go with Grant Dawson. I know another one that we side different on, but I think, taking a step up to lightweight, hopefully the weight's under control. It was like 5 fights in 15 months that he had, and now he's taken a 6-month break. Pupil of James Krause, I really hope for a much improved and a good form of Grant Dawson on Saturday.
Yeah, something a little bit new that we're doing here on the podcast, but we will be sticking with the same fight. My best bet of the night is actually Leonardo Santos and Grant Dawson. Fight doesn't go the distance. It's sitting at plus 120 now, and one that we're really looking to play.
Best bet for me, I love my 160 price tag on Max Griffin now that it's sitting at a minus 200, but dude, we beat the line movement on Gregor Gillespie by a mile there, and that is easily my best bet of the night. If anybody was able to get on that early, I think that's a very quality bet that's likely to hit on Saturday. And the last thing that we're going to add is our best underdog pick of the week. So no shock for me if there's a dog that gets it done. It's Derek Brunson in the main event here, man. Just the better wrestler, been a staple of the division for so long, and I'm not sold on Kevin Holland.
Mine again, it's going against you. It's the Leonardo Santos pick. It seems like that fight's going to be a really interesting one for us personally, and I think for all of you guys as well.
Yeah, man, if you guys are still with us and enjoy the breakdowns, hit that like button for us. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Throw some comments down in there who you guys got in the main event here between Brunson and Holland since we're split. Definitely want to get some of the takes that you guys have out there. Hope you're cashing with us.
Yes, sir.